What have we learned from the Georgia Bulldogs and across college football through the first 4 weeks of the 2023 season? That's what I want to talk about today. I'm actually driving back home from Athens. Georgia beat UAB last night. Solid win. Wasn't perfect, but it was a solid win. But I still think Georgia is the number one team in the country, and they will be, I think, unless something crazy happens, when they take on Auburn this upcoming weekend. What have we learned about the Dogs so far? Where do they sit in the college football world? Let's jump right into it. I think it's, as far as the entire game goes, this championship, I think, is up for grabs. You've got a lot of really good teams, a lot of strong teams, but I don't think there's one team separating themselves from everyone else. Like I said, Georgia, I think, is number one. They still haven't played their best. Ohio State gutted out a big-time win on the road against Notre Dame. That's probably the biggest win that anyone has. I still think Notre Dame could be a top 5 team. They're solid. They have good quarterback play. Both defenses, I thought, played extremely well. So Ohio State's going to be there in the mix. Penn State looks really good. They blanked Iowa at home. I mean, Penn State, this needs to be the year they beat either Ohio State or Michigan. But what teams, if you're a Georgia fan, and most of you are watching this, what team, I guess, would scare you the most? It doesn't look like Michigan is scaring anyone. They're a really good team. They're not wowing anyone. They're not just bulldozing people into the ground. And Georgia's not necessarily either, but these games are not really competitive. They had a come-from-behind win against South Carolina, but cupcake season's over. I still think, if you're Kirby Smart, you pretty much know your strengths and weaknesses by now. Weaknesses being, really the injuries. We're not even close to saying what a fully healthy Georgia team can do, and they don't need to be fully healthy by Auburn. They should win that game. Auburn's offense stinks. They stink to high heaven. The defense is solid. Is Florida the best team on the schedule? They have Kentucky on the road this upcoming weekend. Kentucky can win that game. Kentucky could be heading into Athens undefeated, ranked in the top 25 for that big matchup, which I guess should be at 3:30 in 2 weekends. But South Carolina goes to Knoxville. They play Tennessee this weekend. Spencer Rattler is playing outstanding. South Carolina can win that game. Tennessee's... Joe Milton is what he is. He's not a quarterback that's going to beat elite teams and elite defenses. They're not as good as most people thought. They got drubbed by the Gators down there in the swamp, which is kind of always what happens when they go down there. But who's the second best team, in the SEC East? You could make a case for South Carolina. Missouri's not bad at all. It doesn't look like it's Tennessee, and it could be Florida. So we'll find out a lot about, is Carolina a top 25 team when they go on the road? If they can beat Tennessee on the road, that is a solid win for them. Tennessee's season would be over at that point. What about, nationally still? Florida State can win close games. That's what we know about them. Edging one out against Boston College, coming from behind and beating Clemson on the road. Clemson had that game and dropped it. They had the game and they Clemsoned it away. Classic Dabo, but Florida State escapes, and that's kind of the theme of their season so far. Big time win over LSU, but LSU's got some problems. They did not look great against Arkansas. That's supposed to be this deafening, loud, crazy experience. Tiger Stadium at night, and the Hogs came in there and really pushed them and almost won that game. You can't give up 30 to Arkansas at home at night, not in Death Valley, right? Can't do it. LSU is not the team we thought they were. Florida has to play them eventually. I mean, there's still some interesting games out there. But the Dogs can absolutely win this. I know everyone wants to see them play a complete full 4 quarters, and I do too. They haven't played 4 quarters solid all season yet, and they don't have to. Maybe that's against Auburn. Maybe they come out playing with a chip on their shoulder. I think they're going to be ready. Kirby's teams usually play pretty well on the road. Haven't lost to Auburn since 2017 out there. find it extremely hard to believe Georgia would drop this game on the Plains, but Kentucky might give them fits. Are they the second best team in the SEC? We'll see if they beat Florida. I think preseason I had Kentucky as the number 2 team in the East. Beating Florida and beating Tennessee later in the season, I still think that could happen, but this is just me rambling. This is a rambling video, just trying to get home, but this is a fun season of college football so far. Wish there was a 12-team playoff, because I think this is about as even as it's been in a while. Again, you can make the case for multiple teams being number 1 in the country. I would still put Georgia number 1. There's no reason to drop them back, even though they don't necessarily look as good as they were last year or in 2021. So maybe as a team, they've taken a small step backwards, but if they're still elite, if you're talking about the top 5 programs in college football, the top 5 teams, Georgia's in that top group, and you can read more about this over on Dog Post. Click that link below to sign up to the free newsletter so you don't miss any of the great content that we have coming over on Dog Post. But I'd probably still put Michigan at number 2. Texas, I would put ahead of Florida State. Hard to really buy into this Florida State team when they're messing around 2 weeks in a row. Could have lost both games to Boston College and Clemson, but Texas, I think, had a strong win against Baylor. They've got a lot of talent. They've got a really good quarterback. I think Texas could be in that college football playoff. Oklahoma's still undefeated. Messed around with Cincinnati a little bit, but that's a conference game on the road. Those are never supposed to be easy. They won a tough game down there. That defense is looking like it's going in the right direction for sure. I think Brent Venables is kind of riding that ship a little bit, and they're heading in the right direction. But yeah, this will be another big time SEC week this upcoming weekend. Georgia should take care of Auburn easily, but we'll see if the Gators can go up to Kroger Field in Lexington and win a game on the road at noon. That's going to be really tricky. I think Tennessee has had this game against South Carolina circled for a while. LSU play at Ole Miss. I think that's a 6 o'clock game. I think Ole Miss, they look like a fraud against Alabama. I think LSU could still be a fraudulent team. So those are 2 teams in the top 25 that I don't think are they're not great. They could still be good teams, but Ole Miss really dropped the ball against Alabama. That was a game they needed. Lane Kiffin needed that game. If they were going to beat Alabama anytime soon, this was the year. And the offense came out and they stunk. They stunk. Of course, Ole Miss comes to Athens later this year. Jackson Dart is not good. I don't think Jackson Dart is good enough at quarterback to beat a Georgia team for 4 quarters. Spencer Rattler might be the best quarterback they see all year. He was 18 for 20. They had to beat Mississippi State. There's not a lot of games, if you're South Carolina, where you can circle on the schedule and say, okay, that needs to be a win, probably should be a win. That's one of them, and they won that game. We'll see how good they play up in Neyland Stadium. Again, Tennessee is not as good as we thought. South Carolina could go up there and play spoiler again. But again, a lot going on. Ohio State, top 5 team. I still think Notre Dame's really good. Florida State is still undefeated. Texas is still undefeated. Washington is really good. Washington is clicking in all 3 aspects of the game: offense, defense, special teams. They look like a top 5 team. Oregon looks really good. A lot of these teams would really push Georgia, I think, for 4 quarters, but the Dogs should be number 1 still. And I think if you give them a full week to prepare for a big game, and Auburn's a big game. No way around it. They're dominating the series right now. And I joke with Dean all the time, Auburn may never beat Georgia again. Next 100 years, Auburn might never beat Georgia. Georgia Tech may never beat Georgia again. I joke, but Georgia's got their number, and they're going to go over there and I think win the game comfortably. And they should win the East. I don't know who they're going to play out of the West. It still could be Alabama. I guess it could still be LSU. A&M doesn't look great. It's not going to be Auburn. I don't think it's going to be Ole Miss anymore, but Georgia can absolutely win the championship. That's kind of where I'm going with this, but that top 4 is up in the air, and if teams like Florida State and Texas go undefeated, Notre Dame's going to be on the outside looking in. If that's the only loss they have to Ohio State, is Penn State going to run the table? There's, I think, 10 really good quality teams, has to get narrowed down to 4 at some point. Georgia's obviously in that mix. They are elite. You can, of course, read more about that over on Dog Post. But where am I wrong? Is there a team that you think is better than I think that could win this thing that no one's really talking about? Is this the year for Texas? Are they back? Is Georgia the only really good team in the SEC? Can Washington really play spoiler and be a Cinderella story? It's not Colorado. Maybe it's Oregon. Maybe it's Michigan. Should be a fun ride. Thanks for joining. We really appreciate you watching these videos, and I hope to see you over on Dog Post.